My kingdom for a wife who doesn't text at dinner. I muttered this under my breath as Tara's manicured fingers danced across her phone screen for the 5th time since we'd sat down. The chicken was getting cold. Maddie was rolling her eyes at her mother's behavior, and I was wondering when exactly my marriage had become a 3-way relationship between me, my wife, and her damn iPhone. "Sorry, babe," Tara said without looking up, her blonde hair falling like a curtain between us. "Kelsey's having drama with her husband again. You know how it is." Actually, I didn't know how it was. When I had problems, I talked to my wife about them, or at least I used to, back when she'd listen for more than 30 seconds without checking her notifications. "Dad, can you pass the potatoes?" Maddie asked, shooting her mother a look that could melt steel. At 16, my daughter had already mastered the art of sarcasm better than most adults. She got that from me. "Sure thing, kiddo." I handed over the bowl, catching Maddie's eye. We shared a moment of silent understanding, the kind that happens between family members when one of them is being ridiculous. Tara finally put her phone down, but only because it started ringing. "Oh, it's Brooke. I have to take this." "We're eating dinner," I said, my voice carrying that edge it gets when I'm trying real hard to stay calm. "It'll just be a second." She was already answering. "Hey girl, what's up?" I watched my wife of 18 years walk into the living room, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper women use when they're about to tear someone apart. Maddie and I ate in silence, listening to the occasional burst of laughter from the next room. "She's getting worse," Maddie said quietly. "Your mother's just going through something," I replied, though I wasn't sure what that something was. Tara had always been social, but lately it felt like she was living 2 different lives, one with us and one with her friends that seemed infinitely more interesting to her. 20 minutes later, Tara returned to find us loading the dishwasher. "Sorry about that. Brooke's neighbor is having an affair with the mailman. Can you believe it?" "Shocking," I said, scrubbing a plate with more force than necessary. A married person being unfaithful. Who could imagine such a thing? Tara missed the sarcasm entirely. "I know, right? Some people have no shame. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. The irony would be funny if it weren't so pathetic." That night, as Tara scrolled through Facebook in bed beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember when things had started feeling so off. Was it when she'd started going out 3 nights a week? When she'd stopped asking about my day? When she'd begun treating our home like a hotel and me like the maintenance staff? "Evan, you're breathing loud," she said, without looking away from her screen. "Sorry for being alive," I muttered. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm just trying to read." Read, right? Because the riveting saga of who wore what to which restaurant was definitely literature. I rolled over and tried to sleep, but my mind kept churning. Tomorrow, I'd go to work fixing other people's air conditioning units, sweating in attics and crawl spaces, while Tara showed houses to rich people who made more in a month than I made in a year. She'd come home with stories about clients' beautiful homes and expensive cars, always with that wistful tone that made it clear she thought we were living beneath her standards. The thing is, we weren't poor. I made decent money, we owned our house outright, and Maddie never wanted for anything important. But somewhere along the line, decent had stopped being enough for Tara. She wanted more status, more excitement, more everything except more time with her family. 3 days later, the first real crack appeared. I was under the Hendersons' house, wrestling with a stubborn ductwork connection, when my phone buzzed. Text from Tara. "Girls' night at Rossetti's. Don't wait up, another girls' night. That made 4 this month, and we were only halfway through." I finished the job and headed home, stopping at the grocery store to pick up dinner for Maddie and me. As I was loading bags into my truck, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was Tara's silver Lexus, the one she'd insisted we needed for her real estate career, parked outside Rossetti's. But she wasn't inside having dinner with the girls. She was in the parking lot, leaning against the driver's side door, talking to a man I didn't recognize. A big guy with gym muscles bulging under a tight black t-shirt, the kind of guy who probably spent more on protein powder than I spent on groceries. They weren't just talking. Tara was laughing, touching his arm, doing that thing where she tilted her head and looked up through her eyelashes. I'd seen her do it 1,000 times when we were dating. I hadn't seen her do it with me in years. I sat in my truck, watching my wife flirt with a stranger in a restaurant parking lot, and felt something cold settle in my chest. The smart thing would have been to drive over there, introduce myself, see what innocent explanation she had. Instead, I drove home and cooked dinner for my daughter, acting like everything was normal while my world quietly shifted on its axis. "Mom's out again?" Maddie asked as we ate grilled cheese and tomato soup. "You know your mother." "Social butterfly." "More like social vulture," Maddie muttered. "That's not nice. Neither is abandoning your family every night to hang out with people who talk about nothing but money and gossip." I couldn't argue with that logic. After Maddie went to bed, I sat in my garage workshop, pretending to organize my tools while really just trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe the guy was a client, or a friend's husband, or someone she knew from work. Maybe I was being paranoid. But when Tara came home at midnight, reeking of expensive perfume I hadn't bought her, I knew I wasn't being paranoid enough. "How was dinner?" I asked from the kitchen, where I was pretending to read a trade magazine. "Oh, you know how it is with the girls." Lots of wine, lots of laughs. Kelsey's thinking about leaving Derek. "That's too bad." I watched her face carefully. "Where did you end up eating?" "Rosetti's. The service was terrible, but the company was good." She was lying to my face, and we both knew it, but neither of us was ready to call it what it was yet. Over the next week, I started paying attention to details I'd been ignoring. Tara was dressing differently, more makeup, tighter clothes, always checking herself in every mirror she passed. She'd started working out again, something about getting back in shape for summer. She was on her phone constantly, but now she took it with her to the bathroom, kept it face down during the rare moments we were in the same room. The breaking point came on a Saturday night. Tara announced she was going out with the girls again, this time to some new wine bar downtown. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted like guilt. An hour after she left, Kelsey called the house phone. "Hey, Evan, is Tara around? I left my purse in her car earlier." "She's out with you, isn't she?" Silence. Then, Oh no. "Evan, I'm so sorry." "I thought you knew." I hung up without another word. So there it was. My wife of 18 years, mother of my child, the woman I'd built my entire adult life around, was lying to me. Not just little white lies or omissions, but bold-faced, look me in the eye and lie lies. I could have confronted her that night, could have called her cell phone and demanded to know where she really was, could have driven around town looking for her car. Instead, I did something much smarter. I went online and ordered a small security camera. The camera arrived on Tuesday, disguised as a smoke detector. I installed it in our bedroom while Tara was at work, positioning it to cover the doorway and most of the room. If my wife was living a double life, I was going to document every second of it. I didn't have to wait long. Thursday night, Tara announced another girls' night. This time, she didn't even bother with details, just said she'd be late and not to wait up. I kissed her goodbye and told her to have fun, playing the role of the clueless husband while rage burned in my chest like acid. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the camera. I opened the app and watched my wife stumble into our bedroom, but she wasn't alone. The man from the parking lot was with her, all muscles and swagger, his hands already on her body before they'd even closed the door. I watched for 30 seconds, just long enough to confirm what I already knew, then turned off the phone. Some things you can't unsee, and I'd seen enough. His name was Blake Foster. It took me exactly 15 minutes of internet searching to find out everything I needed to know about him. He owned a car detailing business called Premium Shine, drove a cherry-red Camaro that he probably thought made him look successful, and had a Facebook page full of gym selfies and motivational quotes about grinding and winning. He was also married with 2 kids and a wife who posted family photos with captions about being blessed and grateful for my amazing husband. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Friday morning, Tara was all smiles and affection, making me coffee and asking about my day like she actually cared. I played along, but inside I was calculating. Evidence, documentation, strategy. I wasn't going to blow up my life in a moment of anger. I was going to do this right. I was thinking, Tara said, buttering toast with elaborate care, maybe we should start going out more. As a couple, I mean. We've gotten so boring. Boring, I repeated. Right, because there's nothing exciting about 18 years of marriage and raising a daughter together. That's not what I meant. But her tone said otherwise. I just think we could use some adventure. Some spark. The spark was probably waiting for her in his detailed Camaro, but I didn't say that. Instead, I nodded and agreed that, yes, we should definitely work on putting some excitement back into our relationship. The irony was so thick, I could have cut it with a butter knife. That weekend, Tara suggested we go to dinner at Romano's, the fancy Italian place downtown. Just the 2 of us, she said, like old times. I should have been suspicious, but part of me wanted to believe she was trying to fix things. Maybe the affair was over. Maybe she'd realized what she had at home was worth more than whatever Blake Foster was offering. I was wrong. We were halfway through our appetizers when Tara's phone started buzzing. She ignored it the first time, but when it buzzed again, she glanced at the screen and her face lit up. I'm sorry, honey, but this is important. Kelsey's having a crisis. She answered the phone right there at the table. Hey, babe. Babe. She called the person on the phone babe right in front of me, then caught herself and tried to cover with a cough. I mean, hey girl, what's wrong? But I'd heard what I'd heard. And when she excused herself to take the call outside, I followed her. Through the restaurant's front window, I watched my wife pace the sidewalk, her free hand gesturing animatedly as she talked. She was smiling, laughing, twirling her hair around her finger like a teenager. This wasn't a crisis call with Kelsey. This was a love call with Blake. When she came back inside, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright. Everything okay? I asked. Oh, you know how Kelsey gets. Drama, drama, drama. She picked up her wine glass and took a long sip. Where were we? We were at the end, but she didn't know it yet. The next morning, I called in sick to work and followed Tara to her real estate office. She went inside for exactly 12 minutes, then came back out and drove straight to the Marriott downtown. Blake's Camaro was already in the parking lot. I sat in my truck and watched them through the hotel's glass doors. They met in the lobby like they'd done this 100 times before, casual, comfortable, completely shameless. Blake had his hand on the small of her back as they walked to the elevators. Tara was carrying an overnight bag I'd never seen before. They were upstairs for 3 hours. When they came back down, Tara looked like a woman who'd just had the best afternoon of her life. Blake looked smug and satisfied, like a man who'd just conquered something that didn't belong to him. I followed Blake back to his car detailing shop, a converted garage in an industrial part of town. Premium Shine was painted across the front in gold letters, and there were 3 cars in various stages of being cleaned. Blake parked his Camaro in a spot marked Owner and strutted inside like he owned the world. That's when I got my first real idea for revenge. I drove to the hardware store and bought a bag of concrete mix, then stopped at the fish market for the smelliest, most rotten fish they had. The teenage clerk looked at me like I was crazy when I specifically asked for fish that had gone bad, but $20 cash convinced him to check the dumpster out back. That night, after Tara went to sleep, I drove back to Premium Shine. The place was dark and empty, but Blake's precious Camaro was still parked in its special spot. I mixed the concrete with water from a nearby spigot, then carefully poured it into the car's tailpipe. The rotten fish went under the hood, tucked into places where they'd smell terrible, but wouldn't be immediately visible. It wasn't enough to hurt anyone, but it would definitely ruin Blake's day, and his car, and probably his week. I was back home by midnight, slipping into bed next to my cheating wife with a smile on my face for the first time in months. The next morning, Tara was unusually jumpy. Her phone kept buzzing, but instead of answering it immediately like she usually did, she kept glancing at me nervously. "Everything all right?" I asked over coffee. "Fine. Just work stuff." But when the phone rang for the 5th time and she saw the caller ID, her face went white. "I have to take this," she said, rushing outside. Through the kitchen window, I watched her pace the backyard, her voice getting louder and more agitated. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the panic in her body language. When she came back inside, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her purse. "Emergency at the office." She was gone for 4 hours. When she came back, she looked exhausted and stressed, her perfect makeup smudged and her clothes wrinkled. "Rough day?" I asked innocently. "You have no idea." Actually, I had a pretty good idea. Blake had probably discovered his car problems and called Tara in a panic. Maybe he'd accused her husband of sabotage. Maybe he was having second thoughts about messing around with a married woman whose husband knew about air conditioning systems and had access to all kinds of interesting tools and chemicals. Good. Let him sweat. That evening, Maddie came home from school with news that made my day even better. "Dad, you know that car detailing place on Industrial Road? Premium Shine?" My heart skipped a beat. "What about it?" "There were like 6 fire trucks there this afternoon. Not a fire, but something about a gas leak or chemical smell. They evacuated the whole block. I nearly choked on my beer." "Really?" "Yeah. My friend Jessica's mom works at the insurance office next door. She said the smell was so bad people were throwing up in the parking lot. Apparently, rotten fish in a hot engine compartment created a more dramatic effect than I'd anticipated. I made a mental note to be more careful with the quantities next time." "That's terrible," I said, trying to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. The owner was going crazy, screaming at the fire department that someone had sabotaged his business. But they couldn't find anything actually dangerous, so they just told him to clean it up and air the place out. Tara, who had been unusually quiet during dinner, suddenly looked up. "What was the owner's name?" "I don't know," Maddie said. "Some guy with a fancy car." Jessica said he was really upset about his Camaro not starting. Tara's fork clattered against her plate. "I'm not feeling well. I think I'll go lie down." She disappeared upstairs, and I heard our bedroom door close with more force than necessary. A few minutes later, I could hear her talking on the phone, her voice muffled but clearly agitated. "She's acting weird," Maddie observed. "Your mother's under a lot of stress at work." "Is that what we're calling it?" I looked at my daughter sharply. "What do you mean?" Maddie shrugged, but there was something knowing in her eyes. "Nothing. Just that she's been acting different lately, like she's got a secret or something. Smart kid. Too smart, maybe." I made another mental note to be more careful about what I said and did around her. The last thing I wanted was to drag Maddie into the middle of this mess. But as I sat there listening to Tara's muffled phone conversation upstairs, I realized the mess was just getting started. The next few days were a masterclass in watching someone try to hold their life together while it slowly fell apart. Tara was jumpy, distracted, and constantly checking her phone with the kind of desperate anxiety that comes from knowing you're in trouble, but not knowing how deep it goes. I, on the other hand, was having the time of my life. Every morning I'd check the local news and social media for updates on Premium Shine. The story had legs. Apparently the smell had been so bad that the health department got involved. Blake was quoted in the newspaper calling it an act of terrorism against small business and demanding a full investigation. The police had dutifully filed a report, But without any evidence of actual criminal activity, there wasn't much they could do. Meanwhile, I was planning my next move. Walt Kowalski had been my best friend since high school, back when we were both stupid enough to think we'd be rock stars by the time we turned 30. Now he owned a bar called the Rusty Anchor, and I'd been crying in his beer about my marriage problems for months without really telling him the whole truth. Time to change that. "You look like a man with a plan," Walt said, sliding a beer across the bar to me. It was Tuesday afternoon, and the place was nearly empty except for a couple of regulars watching daytime TV. Maybe I am. "This about Tara?" I nodded and took a long drink. "Remember how I told you she's been acting strange?" "Yeah, you said she was going out a lot, being secretive." "She's having an affair." Walt's eyebrows shot up. "Jesus, Evan. You sure?" "I've got video." "Shit." Walt poured himself a shot of whiskey and knocked it back. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to destroy them both." The words came out calmer than I felt. For weeks, I'd been consumed by rage, hurt, and betrayal, but sitting in Walt's bar, saying it out loud, I felt something else. Clarity. "Legally," I added quickly, "I'm not going to hurt anyone. But I'm going to make sure they lose everything that matters to them." Walt leaned across the bar, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Tell me what you need." Over the next hour, I laid out everything I knew about Blake Foster and his business. Walt listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions or offering suggestions. By the time I finished, we had the beginnings of a plan. "The thing about guys like Blake," Walt said, "is they're all image. Take away the fancy car and the successful business, and there's nothing left but a middle-aged man having a midlife crisis." "And Tara?" "Tara's all about status. She wants to be seen with someone who makes her feel important. Make Blake look like a loser and she'll drop him like a hot potato." It was a good plan, but it needed refinement. Over the next few days, I did reconnaissance like I was planning a military operation. I learned Blake's schedule, his habits, his weaknesses. I found out where he lived, where he ate lunch, where he worked out. I discovered that his wife posted their entire life on Instagram, including when she and the kids were out of town visiting her mother. Most importantly, I found out that Blake Foster was not nearly as successful as he pretended to be. A little digging into public records revealed that Premium Shine was behind on rent. Blake's house had a second mortgage, and his precious Camaro was financed at an interest rate that suggested his credit was garbage. The man was living paycheck to paycheck, just like most of us, but spending money he didn't have to maintain an image of success. That gave me an idea. The next Saturday, while Tara was at another girls' day that I knew was really a day with Blake, I put my plan into action. I started by creating a fake email account and sending messages to all of Blake's competitors in the car detailing business. The emails, supposedly from dissatisfied customers, detailed terrible experiences with Premium Shine. Cars returned with scratches, missing items, rude service, and overcharging. Then I got creative. I printed up flyers advertising a grand reopening sale at Premium Shine, 50% off all services, satisfaction guaranteed or your money back. I posted them all over town, especially in the parking lots of expensive car dealerships and country clubs where Blake's target customers shopped. Finally, I called in a few favors. My buddy Rick worked for the city's code enforcement department. A casual mention that I'd noticed some questionable electrical work at a certain car detailing shop was enough to get Blake a surprise inspection. My neighbor's cousin worked for the health department. A tip about possible chemical storage violations earned Blake another visit from the authorities. None of it was illegal. All of it was perfectly legitimate. And all of it was designed to make Blake Foster's life as complicated and stressful as he'd made mine. The results exceeded my expectations. By Wednesday, Blake's phone was ringing off the hook, with people demanding the 50% discount I'd advertised. When he tried to explain that there was no sale, customers got angry. Some threatened to report him for false advertising. Others just showed up at his shop and refused to leave without the promised discount. The code enforcement inspection found several minor violations that required immediate correction. The health department visit resulted in a warning about proper ventilation and chemical storage. Neither was a major problem, but both required Blake to spend time and money he didn't have. Most importantly, the negative reviews and word-of-mouth complaints were starting to affect his business. I could see it in the decreasing number of cars at his shop, the increasing desperation in his social media posts, and the growing stress in Tara's behavior. She was snapping at Maddie, forgetting appointments, and spending even more time on her phone than usual. Twice, I heard her having heated conversations in the backyard, her voice carrying that edge of panic that comes from watching your secret life implode. "Mom's really losing it," Maddie observed one evening after Tara had yelled at her for leaving a glass in the sink. "She's under a lot of pressure." "From what? Selling houses? It's not like she's performing brain surgery." My daughter was getting too perceptive for her own good. I was going to have to be more careful about how much she saw and heard, but I wasn't going to stop, not when I was just getting started. The next phase of my plan required more direct action. I waited until Thursday night, when I knew Blake would be at his weekly poker game, information courtesy of his wife's oversharing on social media. Then I drove to his house with a bag of supplies. I didn't break in. I didn't damage anything permanently. I just made some modifications that would cause maximum embarrassment with minimum legal risk. I replaced his porch light bulbs with colored ones, red, green, and blue, that would make his house look like a carnival at night. I placed a "for sale by owner" sign in his front yard with a phone number that led to a premium service line. And I left a few business cards for discreet adult services scattered around his driveway where his neighbors would find them. Childish? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. Within 2 days, Blake's wife was fielding calls from neighbors asking about the house sale and complaints about the inappropriate lighting. The homeowners association sent a letter demanding he remove the colored lights immediately. And Blake himself had to explain to his poker buddies why people kept calling him asking about escort services. But the real masterpiece was yet to come. I'd been saving the best for last, a plan so perfectly crafted, so poetically just, that it would expose both Blake and Tara in the most humiliating way possible. It started with a fake invitation. The invitation was a work of art, if I do say so myself. Printed on expensive cardstock with elegant fonts, it announced the first annual Cheaters Anonymous Awards Banquet, a fictional event supposedly honoring the most creative adulterers in our city. Blake Foster and Tara Herod were listed as the guests of honor, winners of the most obvious affair category. I mailed copies to everyone in their social circles: Blake's customers, Tara's real estate colleagues, our neighbors, her friends from the country club. The invitation included photos I'd taken of them together at the hotel, carefully cropped to be suggestive without being pornographic. The response was immediate and devastating. Tara's phone started ringing before she even got home from work. I answered the landline twice, once from her friend Brooke, who wanted to know if the invitation was some kind of joke, and once from our neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who said she was shocked and disappointed, but not entirely surprised. When Tara finally walked through the door, her face was white and her hands were shaking. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" She threw the invitation on the kitchen table. "About this." I picked it up and studied it with exaggerated interest. Cheaters Anonymous Awards Banquet. Sounds like fun. Are you planning to attend? Don't play dumb with me, Evan. You did this. Did what? Create a fictional awards banquet? Why would I do that? Because finally. After months of lies and deception, we were going to have an honest conversation. Know what, Tara? She stared at me for a long moment, tears starting to form in her eyes. But they weren't tears of remorse or guilt. They were tears of anger and frustration. You're trying to ruin my life. I'm not trying to ruin anything. Your life is already ruined. I'm just making sure everyone else knows it too. The words hung between us like a blade. Tara sank into a chair, her perfect composure finally cracking. How long have you known? Long enough to get video evidence. Long enough to document everything. Long enough to realize that the woman I married doesn't exist anymore. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're having an affair with Blake Foster. You've been lying to me for months, and you've been using our daughter and me as cover for your secret life. Tara's face cycled through emotions: denial, anger, fear, and finally, something that might have been relief. You're right, she said quietly. I've been seeing Blake. I know. But it's not just an affair, Evan. I love him. Those 4 words hit me harder than anything else she could have said. An affair was about intimacy, about thrill, about fleeting madness. Love was about choosing someone else over the life we'd built together. Then why are you still here? Because... She struggled for words. Because it's complicated. It's not complicated. You want to be with him? Go be with him. But you don't get to have both lives anymore. What about Maddie? What about her? You think she hasn't noticed that her mother is never home anymore? You think she doesn't see how you treat me like I'm invisible? Tara started crying in earnest now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, no regret for the pain I was causing. She'd made her choice months ago. I was just forcing her to live with the consequences. I never meant for it to happen, she said. But you're glad it did. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to pack a bag and go stay with Blake, or Kelsey, or whoever will take you. You're going to figure out what you want your life to look like. And while you're doing that, I'm going to file for divorce and make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of person you are. You can't do that to me. Watch me. She left that night, taking 2 suitcases and her wounded pride. Maddie watched from the top of the stairs as her mother loaded her car, and I saw something in my daughter's face that broke my heart. Not surprise, but resignation, like she'd been expecting this moment for months. Is she coming back? Maddie asked after Tara's taillights disappeared down the street. I don't know, kiddo. Do you want her to? Maddie thought about it for a long moment. Not if she's going to keep acting like we don't matter. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good, but smart nonetheless. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I hired a divorce attorney, a tough woman named Patricia Vance, who had a reputation for taking cheating spouses to the cleaners. I changed the locks on the house, closed our joint bank accounts, and started documenting every asset we owned. Meanwhile, the fake invitation continued to wreak havoc on both Blake and Tara's reputations. Blake's wife had apparently confronted him about it, leading to a screaming match that half the neighborhood heard. Several of his customers had canceled their appointments, citing moral concerns about supporting an adulterous business owner. Tara's real estate career was suffering too. 3 clients had dropped her after receiving the invitation, and her boss had called her in for a serious discussion about maintaining professional standards. But I wasn't done yet. The next phase required more subtlety. Instead of direct attacks, I began a campaign of strategic information sharing. I sent anonymous tips to the local newspaper about Blake's business troubles, his unpaid debts, and his history of customer complaints. I shared screenshots of his social media posts bragging about his lifestyle with people who knew his actual financial situation. Most importantly, I began reaching out to other people Blake and Tara had wronged. It turns out Blake had a history of affairs. His wife wasn't his first victim, just his most recent one. A little investigation revealed at least 3 other married women he'd been involved with over the past 5 years. I contacted all of them, sharing what I knew and asking what they knew. The picture that emerged was of a serial cheater who targeted married women, particularly those who were unhappy or vulnerable. Blake wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was running a pattern of behavior that had destroyed multiple families. Armed with this information, I made copies of everything and sent them to Blake's wife, his business partners, and several people in positions to make his life difficult. The response was swift and merciless. Blake's wife filed for divorce and a restraining order. His business partner dissolved their partnership and demanded immediate repayment of loans. 3 of his former affair partners came forward with their own stories, creating a scandal that spread through social media like wildfire. Within a week, Blake Foster went from small-time businessman having a midlife crisis to pariah facing financial ruin and social exile. And Tara, who had hitched her wagon to his star, was along for the ride. She called me on a Thursday night, crying and desperate. "You've destroyed everything," she said. "I didn't destroy anything. I just revealed what was already there." Blake's lost his business. His wife took the kids and moved to her mother's. He's talking about leaving town. Sounds like he's facing the consequences of his choices. What about me, Evan? What am I supposed to do? That's not my problem anymore. I'm still your wife. Not for long. The divorce papers were filed the next Monday. Patricia Vance had crafted them beautifully. A document that laid out every detail of Tara's affair, every lie she'd told, every way she'd violated her marriage vows. In Texas, adultery still mattered in divorce proceedings, and Patricia intended to use every advantage the law provided. Tara tried to fight it, hiring her own lawyer and claiming emotional distress, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The photos, the video, the documented lies, the testimony from people who'd witnessed her behavior, it all painted a picture of a woman who had systematically destroyed her marriage for the sake of a fantasy. The final hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, I had one last surprise planned for my cheating wife and her lover, something that would ensure they never forgot the price of betrayal. The final confrontation came on a Friday night in October, exactly 6 months after I'd first seen Tara with Blake in that restaurant parking lot. The timing was perfect. Poetic, even. 6 months of lies deserved 6 months of consequences. I'd spent the week preparing, calling in every favor I was owed, and setting up what I privately called the last bill, a final accounting for everything Tara and Blake had cost me. The plan began with a simple invitation, sent to both of them separately. "Meet me at Premium Shine, 8 p.m. Friday. Come alone. It's time we settled this like adults." I knew they'd come. Blake because his ego wouldn't let him back down from a confrontation, and Tara because she still harbored some fantasy that she could talk her way out of the consequences of her choices. I arrived at Blake's shop early, using skills I'd learned in 20 years of HVAC work to disable the security cameras and override the electronic locks. The place was a shadow of its former self. Half the equipment was gone, repossessed by creditors, and the few remaining cars looked abandoned. Blake showed up first, driving a beat-up Honda that was a far cry from his repossessed Camaro. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that had seen better days. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by the desperate posture of a man who'd lost everything and knew it. "You son of a bastard," he said when he saw me waiting in the empty garage bay. "You destroyed my life." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied calmly. "I just sent some bills to people who owed them." "Bills?" I pulled out a manila folder and opened it on the workbench between us. "Let's see. You've been screwing my wife for 8 months. In that time, you've cost me approximately $15,000 in marriage counseling that didn't work because one party was lying. Legal fees for the divorce, lost wages from the emotional distress that affected my work performance, and medical bills for the stress-related health problems I developed." Blake stared at me like I was insane. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. You took something that belonged to me, damaged it beyond repair, and now you owe me compensation." "That's not how it works, old man." "It's exactly how it works. In business, when you damage someone's property, you pay for it. When you steal someone's intellectual property, you pay damages. When you interfere with someone's contracts, you pay penalties." I smiled at him. My marriage was all 3. Tara arrived 10 minutes later, looking as bad as Blake. Her perfect hair was limp, her expensive clothes were wrinkled, and her face showed the strain of weeks of public humiliation and social exile. "What is this?" she asked, looking between Blake and me. "It's a bill," I said, handing her a copy of the same document I'd shown Blake. "For services rendered and damages incurred." She scanned the papers, her face growing paler with each line. "Evan, this is crazy. What's crazy is thinking you could destroy 18 years of marriage without any consequences. You never meant to get caught. There's a difference." Blake stepped forward, trying to reclaim some of his lost machismo. "Look, we're all adults here. These things happen. People fall out of love, they find someone new. It's not personal." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Not personal? You systematically seduced my wife, convinced her to lie to me and our daughter, used my home as a cover for your affair, and destroyed my family. How is that not personal? She came to me, man. I didn't force her to do anything." "No, you just made it easy for her to make the worst decision of her life." Tara was crying now, but they were selfish tears. Tears for her own situation, not for the pain she'd caused. "What do you want, Evan?" "Money? I don't have any money. Blake doesn't have any money. You've made sure of that." "I don't want your money. I want something much more valuable." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small recording device, setting it on the workbench where both of them could see it. "I want the truth, all of it, on the record. Every lie you told, every time you betrayed our marriage, every detail of your affair. I want a complete confession that I can use in court to make sure you never see a penny of my assets or a minute of unsupervised time with our daughter." Blake started to object, but I held up my hand. "Here's the thing. You both have a choice. You can give me what I want voluntarily, or I can get it through other means. Blake, I know about Jennifer Morrison, Sarah Chen, and Lisa Rodriguez, the other married women you've had affairs with. I've got their statements, their evidence, their willingness to testify about your pattern of predatory behavior." Blake's face went white. "You can't prove anything. I can prove everything. And Tara, I know about the money you've been hiding in your personal account, the clients you've been overcharging to fund your affair, and the lies you told your boss about why you've been missing so much work." Tara's tears stopped abruptly. "How do you know about that?" "Because I'm not the stupid, oblivious husband you thought I was. I've been investigating both of you for months. I know everything." The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of exposed secrets and shattered illusions. Finally, Blake spoke. "What happens if we do this? If we give you what you want? Then you get to leave town quietly, without criminal charges being filed for fraud, embezzlement, and theft. You get to start over somewhere else, hopefully having learned something about the cost of destroying other people's lives. And if we don't?" I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. "Then I release everything I have to the media, the police, the IRS, and anyone else who might be interested. I make sure your names are attached to this scandal forever. I guarantee that no matter where you go or what you do, people will know exactly who you are and what you've done." It wasn't a difficult choice, and we all knew it. They talked. For 2 hours, they sat in that empty garage and confessed to everything. The lies, the deception, the betrayal, the financial misconduct, all of it. I recorded every word, occasionally asking questions to clarify details or fill in gaps. When it was over, I had everything I needed to ensure that the divorce would go exactly as I wanted it to, that Tara would have no claim to my assets or my daughter, and that both of them would face appropriate consequences for their actions. "We're done here," I said, packing up the recording equipment. "Blake, I suggest you be out of town by Monday. Tara, you can pick up the rest of your things from the house on Sunday between noon and 2. After that, any communication goes through our lawyers." As I walked toward the door, Tara called out one last time. "Evan, wait. Can't we work this out? For Maddie's sake?" I turned back to look at her, really look at her, for what I knew would be the last time. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and didn't want to know. You should have thought about Maddie before you decided to destroy her family, I said. The bill for that is something you'll be paying for the rest of your life. I left them there in the empty garage, two people who had traded everything real for something fake and found out too late that the price was higher than they could afford. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. I got the house, full custody of Maddie, and my freedom. Tara got a lesson in consequences that I hope she never forgets. Blake left town the Monday after our confrontation, owing money to half the city and carrying the kind of reputation that follows a man wherever he goes. Last I heard, he was working at a car wash in Phoenix, living in a studio apartment and driving a 15-year-old pickup truck. Tara moved back in with her mother and got a job at a discount real estate office in the next county. She sees Maddie every other weekend, when my daughter feels like making the drive. Most weekends, Maddie chooses to stay home. As for me, I learned something valuable about revenge. It's not about getting even. It's about making sure the people who wronged you understand the true cost of their actions. It's about ensuring that consequences follow choices, that actions have reactions, that bills eventually come due. Some people might say I went too far, that I was cruel or vindictive. But those people never had their life's work destroyed by someone they trusted. They never watched 18 years of marriage dissolve because their spouse decided she deserved something better. I gave Tara and Blake exactly what they gave me, the truth about who they really were, delivered at the worst possible moment in the most public way possible. The only difference is I made sure my bill was paid in full,